Hi, everyone. I'm Clyde Bryant, and welcome to episode 19 of the Uptown Experts podcast. I'm here today with my longtime friend, I'm going to say lifetime friend, my consigliere, my guy that I call for anything and everything because we all need somebody. That's Matthew Liberatore.
Thank you, Clyde.
Partner, BDO Law.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Matthew Liberatore. I'm a partner at BDO Law. Long time friend. I think I want to say back to grade one. Clyde.
It is.
So it's a way back playback. Super happy to be here.
We've been talking about doing this for forever. Let's be real, right? Because you're often part of all my crazy ideas. Because usually it's like I get the crazy idea, and then I say, "Okay, I gotta call Matt."
That's exactly it. Okay, so I have this idea.
Yeah, I have the. He knows. He's like, Clyde's calling. Can't answer now. Need at least an hour.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's walk through the craziness.
It's
right?
so true.
So as I often do, I pick up the phone and I call you and I say, Matt, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm thinking. This is how I want to expand the business. And, being the professional that you are, you often have the expertise, or if not, you know where to go. And you've always, helped steer the ship in the right direction. So if I've never said it before, I want to say it now officially. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Clyde. For all your listeners and your viewers, as you know, as we've just disclosed, Clyde and I go back to the first grade. And then I want to say after grade 8, we lived in the same community. We may have seen each other, but it wouldn't be until years later when I was first hired back as an articling student on Bay Street, and I'm walking in the path and I'm having lunch at one of the pizza parlors and I bump into Clyde.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that I needed a mortgage at that time. I'm not sure if I was even married yet.
I don't even think so.
We were just starting. And it was the most serendipitous meeting because, oh my God, Clyde, what are you doing in the path? Matt, what are you doing in the path? And both of our skill sets were needed for each other at that time.
It was.
What are the odds? So it was cosmic.
It was. And I say this often and I'll say it again. First of all, what's meant to be will be.
That's the sense,
right? And like many things in life, these things, they happen for a reason, right? And it's the same thing, like, going back to grade 1, I always remember Matt, he was always smart, he was always studious, he was always the guy that I wanted to beat, right? Let's be real, right? Always competing, right? Because I'm a competitor, right? Of course. And I'm like, no matter how hard I push, this guy pushes harder, right? I'm doing track and field, this guy's doing track and field. I'm doing soccer, this guy's doing swimming. I'm doing first place here. I'm like, what's going on over here, right? But I think that's it's one of the things I admire about you.
Oh,
right?
Thanks, Clyde. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, the feeling's mutual. There was always a level of healthy competition. And I think coming up, especially in a community that we came up in, you've always been someone that I've actually looked up to as well, because let's face it was very heavily, strongly Italo-Canadian, and look at what you've been able to do here in the community. So I think listen, hats off, man.
Thank you.
Hats off.
Well, everything we do is in service of the community, right? And 100%. That's, I think, part of why we found our success, right? Because it's about supporting those that have supported you along the way. And that's everything that we do here at Uptown.
Absolutely.
So let's shine some light on Matt, and I'm going to take 2 seconds, and I'm going to break down what we're talking about here today.
Okay.
In this episode of the Uptown Experts podcast, as I mentioned, I'm sitting down with Matt, and we're going to unpack the legal and financial strategies that families need to know to protect and grow their wealth, as well as pass it on. From estate planning and incorporating to preparing a business for sale, we explore how to avoid common mistakes and maximize value across generations. Whether you're building a legacy or planning an exit, this episode is packed with, I'm going to say, practical thoughts.
Yeah, that's right.
And real-world advice from Matthew Liberatore.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, a little bit about myself. So formerly trained on Bay Street, straight out of law school. And so that's where I cut my teeth on Bay Street. The original areas of practice were securities law. So I saw a lot of listings on the big board and little board. So also helping with RTOs. And then in addition, of course, my practice today is mergers and acquisitions. Mm-hmm. So helping sale side, buy side. So that's my area. Mm-hmm. Naturally, of course, that lends itself to seeing a lot of families, in particular these days, in a state of transition. Mm-hmm. We all know what the intergenerational wealth exchange is going to look like, and it's coming and it's happening and it's here. So those are my areas. That's a little bit about me. I'm now today a partner at BDO Law, and I work with my partners on all aspects at the law firm. But in addition, at BDO, there's a big, it's highly important that there's a democratization of all of our service lines. So again, tax, accounting, assurance, advisory, these are all of our service lines that are directly applicable to what we're talking about here today. Of course, today's discussion will be on, the business side, the succession planning from a business lens. But happy to receive any requests from your listeners about any one of our other service lines, of course.
Yeah, and we'll definitely make available how to get a hold of Matt, or of course, contact us, and we'll circle.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Through. So that's a little bit about me and my practice.
Perfect. So let's talk about what happens when families don't plan ahead, and how that could affect everything from savings to legacy. So here's my first question. What are some things that families forget when planning how to use their money?
I would say a lack of value seen in strategy. So the areas to maximize value would be you want to strategize, so in other words, the mistake made, not putting yourself into your future self and saying, what would future Matthew or future Clyde, what will they be facing? What are they going to need to know? Or at least what questions ought they be asking themselves today so that future self is at least well prepared? That is largely going to point us in a direction of advice and circling yourself around people that at least know that particular area of concern.
So how can families make sure their money plans include what happens after someone passes away?
Yeah, right. So this is a question that comes up quite a bit. I think, let's just call it what it is. Upon the demise of someone, it's chaos.
Of course.
And there's a lot of emotions going on.
Well, I think once, somebody passes away, a business professional, with assets, substantial or not, assets, often it's at that point in time that the family shows their teeth, right? And so what happens?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that come up. Everyone's asking how to transition, how to handle property. So I think one of the first things to understand is the difference between power while you're alive, and that usually comes in the form of like a power of attorney for property or for personal care. That is not to be mixed up or confused with a will and what happens afterwards. The power of attorney is exactly what that is. It's inter vivos, what we as lawyers say, during one's lifetime. So if you need that or want that for your personal care or for your property, that's what your POA is there to do while you're alive. So this is a document, to answer your question specifically, that will allocate powers in those two categories, okay? Once someone, upon their demise, and that death has taken place, those POAs are null.
Yeah.
And so it now goes to your will and what you've put into your will to allocate, and whether there's a primary or secondary will, who your executor is, and what that looks like.
So before you move on from that, because that's a good point. One, some people don't even have one will. They don't even have a primary will. What I heard you just say is a primary and a secondary will. So before you answer my question, which is what's the difference between a primary and secondary will, can you just explain to the viewers why it's important to just have a will, period?
So you want to have a will. And again, I'm an M&A lawyer, and I'm going to leave it to the wills and estates lawyers and the specialists out there. At a very high level, for the purposes of today's podcast and your listeners, wills are how property can be dealt with after your death, okay? And so the way that you want that to unfold is going to be dictated within that will with the people that make the choices that you want them to make. But moreover, some of your assets are going to be registered, okay? The number one easiest thing to think of is a home, for example. That's registered on title, as you know. And so in order for that land to be conveyed, it needs to be, let's call it unregistered, or it needs to be handled in the transaction in question. In order for that to happen, we need to make sure that that can properly be dealt with. And it's done by way of a will, which then gets, the old terminology for it is probated, but there's a lengthier term in a more modern context. And so a will is what allows that type of property to be conveyed. The courts will see it, it gets cleared, everybody understands it, so that way a purchaser comes in, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. A lot of times we always forget it's what the purchaser wants to see.
Yes.
And so this allows a purchaser for value with interest to come in and say, okay, it's been cleared by the courts. One of the tools to do that, or the tool to do that, is the will. And to your second question, depending on the categories, because now you might have some assets that aren't registered in that way, like a title or an account or an RES, like some type of registered account. You'll have a watch or a grand piano, and those are dealt with more of a, let's call them physical assets, if I can say, in a secondary.
Awesome. Good to know.
Yeah. And so those can be conveyed like much more easy.
This is why already giving value, right?
And of course, I should say, and I'm apprehensive of speaking tax. I leave that to my partners, but each one will then have like tax implications as well.
Got you. Thank you. So how do things like wills and trusts help families keep their money safe?
A trust as a concept is, so number one, a trust is not a legal entity like a corporation, okay? And it's not an entity, or viewed as a person, I should say more correctly, like you and I, or a legal entity. It is a construction of the law to create a trust, and that trust, and there are rules behind it, but essentially you are placing assets into that trust so that it is specifically not the settler's trust or the person who put that property in, and it is held and housed in this construct for the benefit of whoever the named beneficiaries are. Effectively, what you're doing is you're divorcing that property from where it came, and you're holding it in limbo, in a sense, until it gets conveyed to the beneficiaries. So when you don't want that conveyed immediately, because there might be tax implications, or because various things might have to happen in life and in time, and then it will be conveyed to the beneficiaries, and you're going to say, well, by whom? Well, a trust, again, isn't a legal person. It is controlled by something called a trust deed. Those are the rules of engagement and order of operations, if I can use those expressions, for the trust. And so it's the trustees who then say, well, it's not my property, and I didn't put the property in here, and we followed all the rules, but we have control to whom this property goes when the time comes.
Gotcha.
Now, this goes back to my law school days in England, but property held in a trust in this way, from a public policy, generally speaking, from a public policy perspective, the government, they don't want property held in limbo like this. And this goes back to real property in England, I think in post 1066 with William the Conqueror, but they don't want, it's not in the interest of the public to have property held for so long in limbo. So that's where the 21-year rule comes in, where at 21 years, it's deemed to be divested. And so that's why we have to be careful of that.
When you start.
And then when it eventually has to convey. So these are things, so a trust is a tool, for example, if, there's been, in the probably the most ubiquitous context I can think of would be in the context of an estate freeze, where mom and dad have been working in the company for years, and they convert their common shares into pref shares. Why? They want to understand how to transfer that business to the next generation, and they want to know what their tax bill is going to look like.
Can I jump in, because I hear you and I understand you. However, the difference between a common share and a pref share, because maybe for some of our listeners, they're just getting into business and they're opening up their businesses, but they don't understand, what does that mean? And why would someone have different share classes? Are we okay to go there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I mean, listen, you've incorporated, and whether the business is brand new or it's been existing for some time, value generally is attributed to the shareholders by the class of shares that you have. And the classes of shares that you have attributes. Some are voting. They allow the common shareholders to vote. It's generally, common shareholders have the right to vote, attend meetings of the shareholders, and so that is the class into which the value goes up. If it goes up, it goes into the common shares. Okay. There can also be other classes of shares if you're getting other investors, for example, but you want them to be more passive, more silent, non-voting, and so that's what you would largely do in a preference class of share. Why are we using the word preference? Because on liquidation or wind up, they're going to come ahead, because they don't have the voting control, they don't have any of that rights that the common shareholders would have, but they put in money and they were quiet the whole time. So should something happen, they are preferred on a liquidation or wind up.
So they would get paid before the common shares.
Correct. Always to be remembered, everybody on this, all your listeners, commons are at the bottom, prefs are preferred, but both of those classes, always remember, you're still shareholders. They come way last, underneath all your debtors, and so that's that, or I should say creditors. So you're still coming at the end. You're still a shareholder. You would just be preferred. So to my point, what mom and dad will usually do is they will take their common shares, and they will do something called a freeze. They will crystallize the value and say, we've been to a business valuator. These are now worth $100. We're going to convert them into preferred shares, and we're going to have that value crystallized at that $100. Okay? And now they're preferred shareholders, and a new class of commons will get created and then subscribed for by the next generation at value 0. And so that situation is an estate freeze. Now, there can also be, in addition to, those commons that the new generation I just said, there can be even more classes of shares added, or those pref shares of mom and dad owned by a trust. And so now what mom and dad are saying is, well, those shares are owned by a trust. We're the trustees of that trust. To whom do those pref shares go, or any other class, depending on how you've strategized your structure. Thank you. That can be in a trust, and they defer the decision. Maybe there's new generation. Maybe the new generations will have children. Maybe there might be a marital breakdown. You don't want it to go to your son or your daughter because there might be some type of marital break. If it's in a trust, you can help avoid that. So this is one of the usage is of a trust.
Very, very good. I mean, you hear these things, you see them, especially in our business, with the types of clients, borrowers that we have. We see a ton of trusts, and we're looking at trust documents, and there are so many different structures, and so you kind of become a little bit of a lack of better words, an expert in reviewing these things, but understanding the intricacies of them.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of them, there's there's a great deal of formality that goes into them. You want to make sure that they're properly constituted. You still have your trust property. There's a whole due diligence aspect to make sure that they're properly set up.
Yeah. And one of the things that I guess with our experience, having access to people like yourself, through the years, we've been able to kind of review some of this stuff and help many people, with their borrowing requirements that have structured their businesses this way. So thanks for expertise, by the way.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Let's move on. For our listeners in real estate, this next part is key. Let's break down how legal setups can protect your investments. Okay. So, first question. What kind of business setup helps people who own property stay safe from, let's just say, big problems?
So we know that business attracts liability just because of the nature of our business. Whether you're in food or whether you're in construction, businesses can run into issues. When there are issues, they usually, there's a claim for damages. When there's a claim for damages, any litigious party is going to go for where there's the most value to recoup those damages. Okay? If real property, and in the current state of where we're at, real property happens to be in many instances where a lot of the value of the family farm really is, okay, that opens up a business to risk because an adverse party, if they're coming after you, they're going to come after you and all of the business's assets. Now, if all those assets are housed in one corporation, well, you're now exposed to everyone outside of you because they'll come after your operations, your business, and all the assets in that business. You recall a few moments ago I had said how the trust was not a legal person. Well, a corporation is a legal person. Correct. And it's viewed as a legal person. So therefore, all of the assets housed within that person is fair game if someone's attacking it, okay? If you now separate out and hold the real property assets in another corporation, not your opco, where a lot of the risks are drawn.
Well, that's where, I'm just going to give the example. If I'm McDonald's, everybody knows McDonald's, right? So I'm going to go and I'm going to sue the McDonald's that dropped the coffee or whatever it is, crazy examples, right? Because that's what you're going to see. But if the McDonald's is owned by another corporation, not the McDonald's yellow sign, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on McDonald's Street, then they're going to try to sue this, but this isn't where the money is.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And so it's just splitting up the assets, splitting up the persons that have those assets.
Gotcha. Which was smart business.
Smart business. So we always recommend having your real property housed in a separate corporation. And of course, how that interplays with your operating business will be a question for your accountants and your tax advisors as to how to maximize that value and have the interrelation between the operating co and the real property co, how that would work.
Yeah, which again, smart business, and I'm seeing it more and more, as we continue to lend, where people used to be coming to us to say, "Hey, Clyde, I'm buying a rental property," which is completely unpopular these days, but still something that people are doing. And they're buying rental property, but they're no longer buying them in their personal names. Yeah. They're buying them and saying, "Clyde, I want to buy a rental property. It's going to be in this company name, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Ontario Inc., Canada Inc., whatever it is, or 22 Strawberry Lane or whatever it is, right?" And the reason why they're doing that is because, well, like you said, if my tenant slips and falls and tries to sue me, well, they're gonna.
That's right.
Who owns it?
That's right. Exactly.
So we've talked about protecting wealth, but what about passing it on? Let's dive into what the next generation needs to know, whether they're selling a business or preparing one for sale. This section's about increasing value and attracting buyers.
Sure. Yeah.
So what do buyers really want to know before they buy a business?
So this is a really important question that you raise, and it's touch points really a lot of touch points on what's happening right now with, I feel, our generation. A lot of my clients and friends of ours that we both know are from homes with a family business. I'm going to take a step. I'll answer the question. I'm going to take a step back. The main issue here is exactly what you've asked. Trying to identify what a buyer wants, I think is the most underrated and not contemplated course of action of our generation.
Well, you build the business to do business, right? To make money, to sell whatever you're selling. It doesn't matter your product, doesn't matter your service, you're a business. But I mean, as a business person, as you're going through your day to day, I hate to say it, you often don't think about, okay, but when I sell it, I need to. We're not doing that.
We're not. And it's the question I get all the time. I want to prove to mom and dad that I can do this. How do I add value? What should I be doing? Even in the context of a small business or all the way up to clients of mine that have and or are thinking about setting up a family office. Okay, great. And you're established, but I want to add that value. How do I take it to the next level? The question shouldn't be, I have a fresh set of energy and I want to bring it in and I want to change things. Of course, there's room for that. But I think sometimes the answer is right in front of you. And that's, how do I optimize and maximize the last 40 years? Like in my home, I'm from a home of a family business, and you know this, we're pushing close to 60 years now. The question isn't, how do I come in here and flip the script and switch it up? The question is, how do I take the blood, sweat, and tears of the last 60 years and maybe just dust off some of the complacency, maybe dust off some of the tried, tested, and true, and optimize it.
Yeah.
As my dad and I, we have conversations all the time, and it's like, well, it's kind of hard to argue with someone that's been running something successfully for half a century. And so I think the real question is in the pith and substance, and we can get into the gnarly details, but it's how do I add value? And the answer to that question, in my opinion, and this might be coming from an M&A lawyer and with my transaction hat on, what does a buyer would want to see from your business? And I think asking just the question unlocks a whole world of an approach of what the next generation should be doing, because it's not only going to add value, it's going to optimize. It's, if for nothing else, and there is no buyer, it's going to force you to start to run things and think about things a little bit differently. So with your permission, I can unpack that, and I think there's a few things. I think let's just jump right into a transaction. Should there be a buyer and they're going to come in and they're going to want to take a look at this, they're going to send you an LOI. And LOI, for your listeners, is a letter of intent. Okay, you may have heard it as an expression of interest, generally an LOI. And this LOI will set out the key terms and conditions as to what the transaction will unfold and how it'll look like. And naturally, you're going to start to see it's going to touch on, what some of your deal breakers are. What types of reps and warranties are you going to give? How are you running your business? And what are you able to say? How do you want the funds to be paid? When do you want the funds to be paid? Are there going to be any trailing liabilities or trailing payments or earnouts? These are the types of things. And all of them have touch points in how you run your business. So, and that then leads to, well, the main question is the purchase price. And then that leads to, and I'm going like a dominoes here, but it really comes down to value creation at the end of the day. And so some of the things that this whole process unlocks and unpacks is, okay, well, a purchaser is going to want to see certain things. Okay, and so at the end of that, how does that look? And so from a value creation perspective, it's going to be things like revenue growth. It's going to be things like, what are you doing and what has your business been doing to increase your revenues? Maybe new SKUs. Maybe there's something in the market that the clients want. What about cost optimization? We are in an era of AI. How can we drop your costs? How can we make you more efficient? That leads me to the third point, which is operational efficiencies, okay?
Yes.
Streamlining operations, improving supply chains. To any of your listeners out there, when you're hearing these things, you're going to start to say, oh boy, we have our, oh my God, I don't know when the last time we checked our new supplier.
Exactly.
Or maybe asked for volume rebates or asked for certain things of this nature.
Because you're dealing in the business.
You've been dealing with it. And, you know, I used the word earlier, complacency. Maybe that was a little bit harsh. But,
a little bit.
But you're running something and it's successful. Why ask or why challenge? Well, right, but you know, these are questions that you're now asking because they unlock value.
Exactly.
What about your marketing positioning? Right, like how's your brand doing?
What is your brand?
What is your brand?
Have you established the
Have
brand?
you established it vis-a-vis some of your competitors? What does that look like? Right, risk management. You know, is there something about your business's value that is risky? What do I mean? Are all your top clients maybe like 2 or 3? Like, is all your revenue up in maybe 2 or 3 really important clients? A buyer's not going to like that.
No.
Maybe you want to diversify that a little bit. So these are some of the thoughts, right? And then your financial performance. And again, the devil's in the details, improving your EBITDA, improving your cash flows, improving your inventory and how that can look and how that can be managed. So when I look at unlocking value, and I look at passing it down, I think the number one thing is not what we've heard over the last decade, which is estate freezes and valuators. And of course, those are important pieces. What I see the next of gen having to do, because I'm really talking about myself here, it's really speaking to an expert like my partners in the value creation space. Because they're going to come in, and it goes right back to your first point, which is what are some of the mistakes people make, or I believe that was it was your question, or not doing, or should they do to avoid. If you're in a business and you are in a moment of time where there's succession, even so much as being contemplated, I think it's almost malpractice, if I can bring a legal word to it, to not speak to a value creator. I think, especially on our team, who will come in and assess where you're at and how to add that value. Yeah. And that dovetails into moments ago when I brought up the LOI, where understanding at least what goes into that LOI. So now you've had your value.
You know the value.
You know what you should be doing to look sexy to a buyer. Great. Now, how is it going to look like from a deal perspective? And that's where the LOI comes in, and this is what I do. This is my main thing, is handling LOIs and then the definitive agreements and then a closing. And so what those elements are. So those would be the 2 branches. Spend on value creation, really understand what that is and what that looks like, and then understanding the order of operations and the story of a deal and a transaction. These are the things that are the 101s that any new gen walking into a business that they're going to receive should be thoroughly versed in.
So how does someone figure out if a business is doing well or not? Like, simply put, I mean, what does that look like?
Well, what that looks like is, it depends on what the business is, what area they are, but what area they're practicing in. But from my perspective, I think it's each of these categories that I just described in. You want to make sure that you're cash flow positive. You want to make sure that you know who your suppliers are and that your risks are as mitigated as possible, not having all your eggs in any one basket. I'm seeing in the market a difficulty on good people, on employee retention and making sure that you have the right staff. So all of those elements, Clyde, all of those elements, good staff, support that you need, strong supply chain, a diversification of your revenues, handling your inventory properly, understanding who your client is in your market, all of those areas that we just discussed on the value creation side, I really, really strongly believe go towards a successful business. You want to kick it up to the next level, definitely understand what a transaction looks like. And that's exactly where my practice comes in.
Let's talk about generational wealth and passing it down, or maybe that's passing down the business. So if you're going to inherit money or inherit a business, what question should you be asking, whether that's mom or dad or whoever?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you want to speak to your tax advisors. I want to know what the tax implications are for mom and dad, what they are for me, what everyone's adjusted cost base is, what their deemed disposition values are. I want to understand what that world looks like.
So all this to say, you're going to get X business, you're going to get whatever sum of money it is from mom, dad, whoever, you're going to get taxed on it.
Right. So I want to view it as a holistic approach and understand that, it's not us or them. It's not, G1 versus G2. It's, okay, this is how it's going to look for us. So this is what I was alluding to earlier on the estate freeze, which is, well, let's understand what mom and dad's tax bill is going to be. They'll have redeemable, retractable shares at a crystallized value. And maybe there's a redemption schedule so that the business, which I had said earlier, are the common shareholders, the brother and sister, or whatever the next generation is. And so now all the new accretive value goes towards those common shares, and then the pref shares are crystallized. And maybe there's a redemption schedule where the company or the business takes a loan out and is buying out mom and dad slowly and slowly and slowly. But now again, those shares that are being purchased, the ones that were transferred as from commons to prefs,
Yeah.
every time that they're sold, there's going to be a tax bill. So as you're taking mom and dad down, we have to make sure that everyone's on side taxes. All of this to say, I want to understand, first question, what are the tax implications? So you're speaking to a tax advisor for sure about this.
How can families get a business ready to pass on to someone else without losing value?
So this is a pithy question. It's all in the transition. And I think, and this is at the heart of my LOI presentation that I always give. It's really understanding what that transition looks like and what everyone's deal breakers are. And I think the smaller the business, I think the more acute these questions become. So it's really about understanding the ins and outs. Is the outgoing generation able to transition and teach the new generation if they haven't been part of it already? What does that transition look like? And this happens in the context of a deal. I'm on a few deals right now with a couple of clients of mine, and they're concerned that the buyers coming in not really fully understanding how important they are to that business and to that process.
But sorry to cut in, but to me, it seems a lot of businesses are heavily built around that owner operator, right? Or the, that whatever the partners, whatever it might be. So where that business is so heavily reliant on that one party, how does one, I'm going to say, be a little bit more cautious, have some more due diligence baked into, any potential agreements or letter of intent to ensure that they have that person maybe there for longer? Like, what is...
Well, this goes to the risk, right? This goes to the value creation that I was talking about. A buyer's going to come in and say, well, then I'm really buying the person. I'm really just buying this person and I need this person. So they'll want to lock up within a transition services agreement or something like that to ensure that person is still there. To your point, however, if we're now sitting in a business and we're thinking, wow, okay, well, I know that a buyer's going to think about this. Now might be the time to diversify. Maybe, you're going to leverage AI. You're going to diversify your work streams so that it's not all on one person. And so that you can show a potential buyer, hey, okay, but the love has been spread around here. But these are the types of things, and you're right to think about that, because it's no different than a company having like one massive client. And then a buyer's going to say, well, again, so just like it's all you running it, it's all just this one client. So yeah, you're right to ask that question. And it's something that I think the next generation really needs to understand of a business receiving it, how important the function is of the previous generation, what exactly did that new generation do and continue to do it. or leverage our new AI to the extent possible, because that's the next thing that I should have mentioned on the value creation, which is, and this is something that at BDO we are remarkably deeply immersed in, is artificial intelligence, and we have a whole practice group on identifying exactly what areas of your business can leverage AI and really take that value to the next level. To your point, where there's only one person or a handful of people, and well, now with the advent of AI, that risk gets mitigated dramatically. But again, it comes down to identifying what's out there, what capabilities does AI have, how they integrate with your business. And so once again, it goes to these value creators that I would suggest is so important that next generation understand.
What does it mean to stage a business for sale, and why is that important?
So imagine, you're selling a home and you don't stage it, right? It could sell. There might be a strategic buyer. There might be a reason why they want that house. Maybe they know that it's going to be developed, whatever the case might be. But for your realtor friends or listeners, they're going to know, well, but staging really helps, and it calms, it paints a picture, and it calms the buyer down. What could be, what maybe exists. Maybe it's one of those homes where you don't really have to stage because it looks like it's staged already. Whatever the case might be, it's going to aid the transaction, and that's predominantly what we're talking about here. You're staging a business to ease the risk profile that a buyer might see and facilitate inducing that transaction. In that process, however, and this is why it needs to be done correctly, a buyer is going to be able to know whether or not you're staging it, or it's not it's not normalized, or it's not something that is long-term sustainable, whatever the situation might be. That's where your diligence, their diligence, or their legal or financial diligence teams will be able to pick up on that.
Gotcha.
But this is my point. My point is from a sell side value maintenance and creation perspective, that next generation needs to be thinking about this, because regardless of a transaction, just by thinking this way, you're already going to add value. You're taking the last 30, 40, 50, 20, pick a number years that the generation before you put into the blood, sweat, and tears of the business, and you'll be able to really extract value from it, whether or not you want to sell it. But that's what you should be thinking about.
We said it before, understanding the community that we both came from, a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, and now the passing on of,
the guard.
Yeah. And so for the listeners, for the people in the community, I guess the real question is, would it make sense for the next generation to be saying to mom, dad, current business owners, let's start staging this business to understand value, to start looking at where we can improve whatever that might be, and then form a value.
Right.
And when we form that value, we now know what, for a lack of better words, what X business is now worth.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head for sure, Clyde. I think that is, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this in my own personal context, of course, but that I think hits the nail right on the head. I think succession planning and passing down of a business and or wealth, we all grew up in those homes. There's ups and there's downs. We've had successful Christmases. We've had lean Christmases. We it makes us who we are. We have some scars, right? The passing down doesn't need to be that way. And I think a lot of the times it's about who made what and what you're getting and who's getting it. And I think that's the analogy that comes to mind is that's a lot of, driving, and you're driving forward, but you're looking in the rearview mirror. and you're like, well, that great.
Yeah, great.
And we're trying to drive it forward, but you're looking at what was. I can't stress enough, looking forward into that valuation and where you're at and what mom and dad or whatever the generation is that built is great, and identify what it is, but identify going forward, looking forward as to how to drive it forward. Who gets what thereafter is, I'm not suggesting it's an afterthought. What I am suggesting is let's move forward though positively in a way where we're building and we're looking to build and we're looking to optimize. You can't, I think, expect after, as the years go on, the same force and vigor 40, 50 years if the business even lasts that long, to have then that it had when it first opened its doors.
Of course.
And so that's where the next generation can come in a more respectful way, is my suggestion, which is how do I take what is being given to me and receive it, but in a way where I'm taking it and optimizing it and moving it forward. You want to add bells and whistles on as it comes in, and I would suggest, if you haven't with AI, then we should speak immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
But doing it in a way where it looks at what's happened, but in a way that's future looking and positive to build upon it, rather than dwelling on the past. I mean, again, it's not to minimize. There are real scars in family, and we cut our teeth on that, and it's with full deference to the generation before. Full stop. I want to make that abundantly clear.
Of course.
But money doesn't sleep. We have to move forward.
We have to move forward. We have to continue to build. And that's why it's smart. It's good to be anyone that has that potentially could benefit from this. The advice is to make sure you're doing this now.
Correct.
Right? Because if not, you're probably going to kick yourself and say, well, why didn't I,
And a lot of it too. And the reason I'm just, as I'm thinking about this and you're speaking, the reason to bring up the LOI is because what the skeletal structure of a deal, what an understanding of a skeletal structure of a deal looks like is so important, is because it's going to advise and inform your decisions today. So if you're of the mindset where you don't, I'm just going to pull an example out. I don't want to have an employment agreement. I never have. I never have with anybody, and it's always worked out fine. Well, maybe if you come to one of our LOI discussions and you hear the whole piece on legal due diligence and employees and how they're going to want to see employment agreements, or how they're going to try to quantify what that risk might look like, suddenly that might advise and inform, oh, well, maybe I should start using employee agreements. That's just an example. But there could be any, because there's going to be reps and warranties in the agreement, and I'm going to have to put my hand over my heart and rep and warranty that, there are no complaints, or nothing has happened, or that I do have written employment agreements, and if I don't, then I'm going to have to disclose that I don't. And so what does that look like, and how does that interplay? I don't want the listeners to get caught up on employment agreements and the important. I'm just saying, as one example, it might advise and inform how you run things today, because there will be things like reps and warranties. There will be things like indemnification. Indemnification is effectively giving a purchaser an insurance package. So that says, if I've said anything in this agreement that happens to be false, and you suffer damages, I will backstop those damages. And of course, there is limits and baskets and caps, and that's probably a separate podcast. But again, understanding the skeletal structure of what might come down the plate is going to get you to at least have the conversation with yourself or your business partners to say, we're going to build all of this to sell it. They're going to be asking these types of questions.
Yeah.
So there is value in maybe having service contracts or subcontractor agreements, or whatever the case might be.
Well, I think, you just said something that's extremely important. When you're starting a business, when you have a business, when you're inheriting a business, when you're buying a business, when you're inheriting a business, you need to make sure that you've asked yourself, or that you've at least, the person that was setting up the business has asked themselves, have they taken the necessary steps in order to prepare that business to be sold? Because often, again, when you're getting started, like myself, you're getting started, right? I want to do this, I want to get started, I want to do this, but Matt's always like, okay, stop, slow down, right? Great.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what is it that you're trying to do in the event of when you're trying to sell, or, is it something that you're going to sell? How do we create value? And, you have to slow down and ask yourself these questions. Otherwise, you don't have the structure. Is it really a business? Or is it more of a hobby? Like what are we doing?
Exactly. Right? Yeah, you got it.
So very, very interesting. We've jumped around a lot of places.
We have.
Okay. I'm going to go off the cuff here.
Okay.
And, because I just want to make sure that we're touching on the things that the people want to hear. So before I throw something at you, I'm going to ask you this. In your experience, what has been the hottest topic, the biggest, I don't want to say biggest problem, but, the problem that you want to make sure our viewers, our listeners don't fall into?
We're experiencing a moment of time of a lot of uncertainty, whether that's in the economy, politically, what stripes or jerseys to even wear anymore. And I think all of that is stacked on top of being a generation where our parents are getting a little older.
Yeah.
They're asking themselves, how much longer do I have? Do I want to pass this down? A lot of us have kids. We're trying to figure that out for our kids. Does it make sense to live in the city? Does it make sense to live out where? Like there's a lot of flux.
Yeah.
And your listeners are probably thinking to themselves, I live in a world of flux. And how do I get some certainty? How do I get some understanding? How do I unpack all the craziness? When it comes to business and succession planning, the most important thing to understand is that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know all of these things. You have to know to whom to speak to get this information.
So true.
And it is not going to the same advisors that you may have thought in the past. It is about relationships. It's about finding people that understand that and that live that. And so to answer the question specifically, it's about knowing at least the topic to start inquiring about, if that makes any sense.
It does.
It's not, I don't have to know all the I just have to know at least one or two questions. And so that's why, if for nothing else today, for all of your listeners and your watchers, it's just about understanding, I'm about to receive or want to receive a business or funds or a business pursuant to some type of succession. I view that as being a steward of that land, the steward of that business. And that's a responsibility. And maybe I'm just watching too much Yellowstone lately. I don't know. But it's about being a steward for the future of that land. How do I maximize that value? You cannot tell me that you have the answer to those questions if you haven't spoken to a value creation specialist or a tax advisor or a lawyer that specializes in M&A. Because, and I say that, and my backup for that is because we live and breathe this, and we see it every day. So, and we work very closely and have personal relationships and or have lived it ourselves in our own personal capacity. That's what I think the most important thing is understanding at least the topics that you should be asking.
Wow. I wasn't ready for that one, Matt, to be honest, right? But I look at that or I hear that part of me and I say, for most, they're often afraid to ask the question, right? Coming from, the community where maybe it wasn't so open about, asking for help even, right? So if someone is looking to, let's say, get information. Today's the day, I guess, that I'm going to answer my own question instead and say, I guess AI would probably be the place where they would start and just kind of maybe spitball some questions in AI and then create maybe a list to ask a guy like Matt.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, the computers are great. But like I used to say, Google's not a doctor.
Yeah, that's right.
AI is not a doctor,
Yeah, that's
right? And
right,
AI is not a lawyer.
We're not,
right?
Yeah.
Definitely not, right? So I'm still going to say you need to get on the phone, book a meeting, whatever it is, and talk to Matt, talk to the guys at BDO Law, because they're definitely, they're going to help you, guide you at least in the right direction, which is extremely important.
And I think part of going into the future with consultants, lawyers, all of our services, I think it's about understanding that you want to be with the right person, you want to be with the right strategy partner that has a level of sophistication, in the sense that if I don't have that institutional knowledge myself, I'm backed by partners that do, and it's that one package. That's the other thing that I think is so important. So I'm gonna add a third. So understand the questions that you have, understand that you need to ask. Your primary focus should be how to add value. That was my whole Yellowstone joke. But the third thing, right, is it's really understanding your listeners have a business to run, right? And you have a business to run, okay? It's about getting the advice that you need, not from 17 places. No. It's about that one holistic partner that has the multiple service lines and expertise that you're always housed within one-stop shop, because they're going to have the institutional knowledge to help you and your business with specificity for what you're going through and for what you understand. I have a hard time living in 2025, 2026, where I see my dad and, okay, he's got to talk to the accountant, and then then he's got to talk to the lawyer, who's then got to talk to the accountant, and the accountant's got to talk to the lawyer. Yeah. Okay, then he's got to talk to the tax advisor, who talks to the lawyer, who then talks to the accountant. And then, but wait, then we have this guy, Matt Liberatore, saying, we got to understand value. Get the value creation guys and the deal guys, and then you talk to the lawyer. So I, to your point about AI, I think modern day partners have to be one, and there needs to be a democratization amongst these service lines to understand that and have one holistic product. And that's something that I'm very proud of that we have at BDO, and we work very, very hard to provide to our clients. So that's what I would say is the third thing. You want to make sure that you're partnering with the right people. You need to run a business.
Smart. Right, that's a smart business move. Right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a day ending in Y. If all things happen correctly, something's happened bad. Like at least one thing has happened, right? So I mean, listen, and I'm talking as from a home with a family business. Like this is what it is. So to the extent that in a modern day where you can have a one-stop shop, if you can, with extremely sophisticated levels of competency, I think that's modern day table stakes.
So let me ask you this, and then I'm gonna cut us off.
Okay.
Because I know we'll go forever.
Oh boy.
So here's what I'm gonna ask you. Often when I'm sitting down with clients, I'm sitting down with investors, and we're talking business, we're trying to give them some guidance. And when we get to the point where we're saying, well, you got to sit down with, a lawyer that might help you structure things a little bit more different, I'm often met with, that sounds expensive.
Right.
That sounds like, something you would do if you're an extremely large corporation, versus I'm just a family business. We sell this, we always been doing this for years. I don't see the reason to.
Sure.
Is there such thing as a business too small to begin to structure and do the things that we've discussed, as compared to, these multi-million-dollar businesses that maybe, people might be thinking of?
Yeah, you got it. So I think that is probably the prime example of what I was just talking about with finding the right partner. So anybody with a good level of sophistication is going to say, well, I would love to speak to any of your listeners. I'm not going to be charging. I'll hear what the situation is and what the need is. But I think a good advisor is going to say right off the bat, like you start with the most minimally invasive procedure, or to use a medical term, the most minimally invasive procedure first. So if we're at a position where it's not needed, I'll be the first person to say it. I think and that's from like a startup perspective or somebody smaller and looking into it. I do see the value in at least understanding the milieu that you're about to operate in, so that you can make an informed decision and at least weaponize that knowledge. I'm just a big proponent of at least understand the questions to be asked. At least ask them, or say that I don't even know the questions to ask,
Which
and then
might be the
hear the
case,
rest.
though,
And that might be the case, and that's exactly it. And then they can make an informed decision as to, well, not right now. I kind of like, I mean, that is what I would say to that. There is nobody too small to at least know, or at least want to have the knowledge.
And I think that goes back to, I'm going to take us right back to one of the statements we made earlier about, the real estate investor that used to buy in their personal name and now is, made the switch. And I'm starting to buy my corporate name. I'm not buying, my single family home maybe anymore. Right. Maybe I'm buying a 6-plex, a 10-plex, or getting involved in a multi-unit residential transaction. And that's not going in, Clyde's name, that's going in the business name. That's not going in Tony's name, that's going in the business name.
Right.
Adding in that layer of protection.
Right. And also what that means with extracting value and what you're going to have to do that, because now it's not yours, it's the company's.
Exactly.
And so what that means. So this is just about the democratization of information in these categories that we're talking about.
And what I'm going to say is, I know we've covered a lot, right? Yeah. And this is some like high level stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Very
that, I'm trying my best to bring it down, because Matt's a really smart guy.
Oh,
and, doing my best to try to make it make sense, right? As we often try to do. But what I will say to anyone that's listening that might want any more information, one, definitely reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with Matt. But even if it's not us, reach out to somebody, because you need to make sure that you've at least asked the questions, or like Matt said, at least get yourself in the room with someone that could start answering questions, whatever they might be. Right. And as I often like to say, I don't know what I don't know, but here's what I'm looking to do, or here's what I would like to do. And then I just stop talking. Right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, listen, it's a partnership. And I think as time goes on, we're seeing that more and more. Establishing yourself in a way that is, keeps value, maintains value, drives value, is very important. And it takes a village. It takes a village, and more so these days than ever before. Being around the right people is so important.
Yeah, I definitely got to agree with you there, because, as I mentioned earlier, it seems like a lot of these family businesses were built with, X person that just went to it, right? Yeah. Every day after day, whether it's making pasta, whether it's building houses, whether it's, selling gems at the convenience store, right? Or whatever it might be, mom, dad, whoever it might be, they went and they did this, but they might not have put together the necessary.
That's right. And I would also say, I'll add that in my case, perhaps maybe there was a push to emancipate and to get out and to figure things out and to get out into the world, and if for nothing else, bring back that knowledge at least, or at least the knowledge to know that something's out there to ask the question. So that to me, I think is the biggest, one of the bigger things for the community to know. There's support out there. There's a lot of really good people. There's a lot of support. And you go from there.
Definitely. I just wanted to make sure at least we put it out there. If we start, that'll be a whole new podcast. For nothing else, for no other reason outside of, to make sure that we at least talked about it. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to bring in just so the business owners that are out there, the people that are going to be, receiving the inheritance or whatever that might be. But for that next generation, this one's for you.
Yeah.
Right? It really is. And I hope you are paying attention, and I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions that are going through people's minds, because it might be the first time that they're hearing some of this stuff, and they're going back, and I know, like I do with podcasts. What did he just say? Right? I'm going to say send in the questions. Ask us questions. Absolutely. Because we're here to help. Yeah. And, I'll do my absolute best to get those things to Matt. And, maybe we collect those questions and we bring you back.
We have another
right?
podcast.
Yeah, right? Because this is important. This is important stuff that's happening every day. Yeah. And, I'm seeing it a lot right now with everything that we do here at Uptown. And so I thought it was important to at least bring you in and at least let people hear a little bit firsthand.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, one thing that I'll say, number one, I agree with everything. Always happy to answer questions. Always happy to hear, have discussions, meet, whatever you need. I think it's just really, really important that I wanted to share with your listeners that this is something that I'm very passionate about, the succession planning within family businesses, because I'm going through it myself right now. And I feel that it's my way of giving back, at least to sort of explain the elements and what the order of operations are, rules of engagement. This is the landscape. This is how things work. I think it's really, really important.
Well, I mean, the best way to learn is to go through it or have done it, right?
Yeah.
I laugh because I'm not knocking. Please, I probably shouldn't even say this, but I'm not knocking realtors. I'm a fellow realtor, right? But I have a problem with realtors that want to show you how to buy a house and they don't own a house.
Oh, right.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry.
You said it.
I said it. I'm sorry, right? But I'm just saying, I understand there's a difference between a practitioner and someone that's doing it. And I'm picking on realtors again. Everybody's going to get mad at me. I'm sorry, right? But I'm just saying, being that you've went through it or you're going through it, you have that expertise, right? Yeah. And for me, I would rather deal with, work with, have the person leading me at least have the experience or at least have gone through the experience themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's all I'm trying to say. Now, there's a lot of people that are smart in the world and maybe they don't have to transact.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
For
but
sure.
This is me putting my hands in the air.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
So two sides.
No,
So,
for sure.
With that, and as I backpedal, I'm going to say, Matt, thank you again for coming. I appreciate
anytime.
it.
Listen, I was delighted. We've been speaking about it for a while. Always happy to jump on and maybe who knows? Maybe we do a podcast on something else.
Yeah, listen. As I said, I'm gonna keep that. They're gonna keep that one in the bottle, if you get what I mean. But I'm looking forward to sitting down next time, and I'm sure it'll be a little bit more of a casual conversation.
For sure, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. For now, Uptown Experts, we're out.